useState is the most used React hook ever. I think it is one of the most important one to understand if you want to use React to build your apps. So let's go find out what it really is about. So I have a basic setup here, two buttons. One is named increment, one is named decrement, and I have a span tag here with a text of 0. So first of all, let's import our use state. And before we proceed further, let's first console.log use state. Let's see what it gives us whenever we call this function use. So it is giving us an array of two elements at the moment. One is undefined, some value, and another one is a function. So what we can do here, we can const arr, and we can now save this inside arr, and this will also give us the same thing. If we console log arr, it should give us the same thing. Yeah, it is giving us the same thing. You can see an array with first value is undefined and the second one is a function. So the undefined value, what we can do is we can define this value by giving you can say a parameter here. So for example, if I give 0 and then save it, you can see now that the first value is 0 and then the second is still a function. So if I console log 0 only and I remove this one, let's refresh just to get rid of the others. So you can see the first element of our array is now 0, and if I change this to say 10, save it, you can see the first element is now arr 0. So whatever we pass in the parameter of our use state changes into is reflected on the first element of our array that is returned with this function. And the function that it returns that we saw, which is inside the second element of our array, is a dispatcher function which we can use to change the value of our state, which is at the moment 10 in the arr 0. So what we can do is we can use this function which is at the moment in arr 1 and change the value of arr 0. So before going ahead, let's use the destructuring that we have in ES6 of JavaScript. Let's say we have count and we have set count, and we use state 0. So what it will do, it will set the first element of this array at with count variable and the second with set count. So first will be the count will be 0 and set count will be a function of a dispatcher function. So we can get rid of this. We can now have count, and just to see it, we can now rather than calling console log, we can put this here and see the value of our count inside our span tag. For example, if I give it 11, if I give it 11 and refresh it, so you can see now it is showing us 11. So whatever the value that we have passed in our set state use state, we are seeing in our count span tag. So now we can use the set count to increase or decrease the value of this count. Let's say we will give this both of these buttons and click a function literal to be very precise. And let's now just go ahead and create this function const handle click, and I will set it to a arrow function, and inside this we can now call our set count. And whenever we so we should not be giving both of them the same thing. Let's just at this time increase count by 1. So what happens now is whenever set count sorry, not count plus plus, rather count plus 1. This should now work. Okay, so count plus plus basically means that we are in increasing the amount of count by 1. which is not possible because we have set it, we have initialized it with the const initial. So let's go ahead. Whenever we click any of these, it will increase the set count. What happens is whenever you call the set count and what the value that you pass in between here, it will set the count variable to this value that you pass here. So at the moment we are passing count, whatever the value of count was, and adding 1 to it. So if it is 18, we click it, it becomes 18 plus 1, that is 19. Click it, it becomes 18 plus 1, 20. So this is very basic. Let's also see some other things. Let's at the moment get rid of this and also get rid of these. So another thing that is very interesting to see is if there are multiple use states, for example 1 and 2 3 4 5 6 7. So this is okay. You can call multiple okay, I have count variable here. It is okay, you can call multiple use states in one component, that's okay. But if the thing that you need to take care here is the execution should be in, so you can say from top to bottom. It cannot happen that this ran and you don't run this and this you run this. For example, if you put some if condition here, if false, or whatever condition you put here, you can say some condition, rather it may be true, may be false. So in this case there may be a chance that it runs, or there may be a chance it doesn't. So this will you can say that change the flow of direction. It is possible that it runs this one and then runs this one and doesn't run this one. So what happens if you save this, it should give you an error, because you cannot use state inside conditions, and also not inside variables and switch statements. So basically whenever you use multiple use states, the execution steps should be from top to bottom. So that's one thing to keep in mind. Another thing that is very interesting to see that I would like to mention here is let's say I set the let's go back to our previous example, count, set count, use state, and set this to 0. And let's again use our count variable here. So here we now add on click again. This time I'll be using inline function. We will call set count and we'll say count plus 1 for decrement, increment, and whenever we call the decrement, we can then go ahead and say count minus 1, just it will make more sense. So whenever we increase, it increases, and decreases, it decreases. So now what I want to show here is whenever this function is called, the set count function, it re-renders the whole component. So whenever I click this set count is called and it will re-render the whole app component. So what happens is whenever we re-render this part is executed again. So if you have, for example, some function here, let's call it state function, and if let's go ahead and create this state function and console log I ran, and then we return 0. So this function, what happens is this function will return 0. So this will be 0 and set count will be 0. Sorry, count will be 0 and we will see 0 here. And this will run fine whenever we do this. So, but another interesting thing is whenever you click, whenever you re-render, this portion of the code is ran again. So, so this is important to understand, because if you have some state that you're computing something, for example, you are computing even numbers or odd numbers, whatever your functionality may be, but if it is very complex, then it re-rendering your app component again and again will slow down your app. So what you can do to get you can say get behind this problem is you can do two things. First is you can simply pass the function literal. So in this case you are not actually running this function, but you just pass the you can see some the kind of a reference to this function. We call this function literal. So if we refresh, and now if I increase or decrease, you can see that this function doesn't run. Another thing that you can do is you can simply pass and you can simply give it an inline function, and console.log I ran, and return whatever the value that you want to return here, and let's get rid of this function, otherwise it will give us a warning. You can see that first time when I refresh, this runs, but if I increase or decrease, it doesn't run again. So this is an important thing to understand if you are making some like complex state. So now I think that's pretty much it to understand basics of useState, and you can use useState. Another thing that I want to mention here, yeah, I forgot. Yeah, another thing that this is possible that you change the value of count, but for that you will have to change it to let. And if I change this count to 10 here, and then console.log count, so this will not stop it from changing it to 10. This will not stop it from changing it to 10. And if I don't have a function here for this, I don't call set count, I just call my function. Okay, I just call my function here, the same thing that and what happens is, now let's create this my function first. Const my function, I'll set this to an arrow function, and what I do here is I just set the value of count is equal to count plus 1. So you will see what happens. So now if I click this button increment, this should run this, but what is happening, I click it, but the value of the span tag doesn't, the count doesn't increase. So what is happening? So in this case, the important thing to notice here is the set count function. The set count function always re-renders the whole component, but if you change the value of your state like this, it will not re-render your component. So here you can see that with this button, what I'm doing is I'm calling the set count function. So I will click this, and you can see it is now changing the value of count. But since I have this here, I am not seeing it like this. So let's save it again. So you can see when I click increment, I'm not changing the value. Actually, I'm changing the value, but I'm not re-rendering the component. But if I click decrement, so you can see that now I am changing the value and re-rendering the component. If I increment, I don't see any change, but if I say decrement, the changed value is shown here, but this decrement will trigger a re-render for the app component. So what happens here is you should not do it like this. You should always follow the convention, that is using using this function to set the variable of our of our state always. So I think that is it for the useState. Go ahead and try to explore more. I am also exploring, learning as I go. That's pretty much it. Thank you. Goodbye.